The film opens with a chaotic scene in the London Underground, where the Green State elite football firm and a rival firm, the Yids, are shouting taunts and exchanging blows. We are then transported to Cambridge, Massachusetts, where Matt Bunker, a Harvard student studying journalism, is being expelled from the university for being wrongly accused of possessing cocaine by his roommate Jeremy. Matt finds himself in a difficult situation with just 2 weeks left until graduation and a prestigious journalism career on the horizon. He decides not to defend himself, resulting in his expulsion from Harvard. Jeremy, who's politically concerned, tries to offer Matt a bribe of $10,000 for his inconveniences, which he declines. Matt tries to reach out to his father, a renowned journalist, but he finds that he's on an assignment in Afghanistan. The film then shifts to London, where Matt travels to visit his sister Shannon, who lives there with her husband Steve and her son Ben. Upon arrival, Matt is surprised by the passion and excitement surrounding football in London, and his sister warns him not to refer to it as soccer. At Shannon's, Matt encounters Steve, who has other plans for the evening with Shannon. With the arrival of his older brother Pete, who is the leader of Green Steel Elite, Matt is bribed to accompany him to the West Ham football game in exchange for a loan and a ride. Although hesitant, Pete takes Matt along for being offered a sum of money. Steve warns Matt to keep the money from Pete and to use it at the pub to buy drinks for the gang. He also warns Pete not to cause any harm to Matt. During their journey, Pete tries to negotiate for half of the money, but Matt refuses. When Matt tries to attack Pete, he is quickly overpowered and dumped on the ground. However, Pete takes a liking to Matt and decides to keep him around. As they enter GSC's local pub, the Abbey, Peter warns Matt to keep quiet about his father being a journalist, and not to mention that he's an American, as they're not really well received by the gang. I mean, who likes an American? Nobody. Even Americans don't like Americans. Matt quickly adapts to the GSC and is introduced as the inspiration for the Karate Kid. The only exception is Bover, Peter's right hand, and he dislikes Matt and tells him to leave. Pete and Bover have a very complex relationship, but despite this, Pete insists that Matt accompany them to the game. As they march towards West Ham Stadium, the firm sings their anthem, "I'm Forever Blowing Bubbles," and chant in unison. During the match, Bover taunts the opposing team, the Brimmers, who are looking for a fight after the game. And after the game, Matt heads towards Shannon's and is chased by the Brimmers. The GSC intervene just in time to save him from harm, and a violent altercation ensues. As Matt prepares to leave, Pete tells him that in a fight, he must stand his ground and focus on someone he hates. Matt expresses his lack of fighting skills, to which Pete responds, "Focus on someone you hate." And after a grueling fight, Matt emerges with bruises but a very clear mind. And when asked who he was fighting, he reveals that his opponent's name was Jeremy. And despite being battered, Matt quickly gains the favor of the firm, with the exception of Bover. He spends the night at Petey's, who fills him in on the firm's main rival, Millwall, and their 10-year-long rivalry rooted in a tragic event involving Millwall's head man's son. Pete stresses the importance of reputation and tells Matt about the firm's former head, the Major, who had the greatest reputation of all. The next morning, when Matt returns to Shannon's, Steve erupts upon seeing Matt's condition and gets into a fight with Petey. Matt tries to intervene, and they engage in a physical altercation. In the end, Matt decides to stay with Petey, while Shannon is left angry with Steve for creating a messy family dynamic. Upon entering the Abbey, Bover insults Matt and Petey by referring to them as a gay couple, nearly inciting another fight. Matt chooses to stay with Petey, despite Shannon's pleas for him to stay. Shannon tries to convince Matt that the firm is not what he's looking for, but Matt responds by saying that she wouldn't know as she left for a foreign country after their mother died. Despite the heated exchange, they reconcile, but it's clear that the Bunker family has its own set of rules. On a rooftop, Matt confides in Petey about his expulsion from Harvard and tells him about Jeremy and what he did to him. Pete expresses his desire to exact revenge on Jeremy, and when asked about his major, Matt, knowing the firm's disdain for journalists, lies and says that he majored in history. Little did he know, Pete happens to be a history teacher. Pete takes Matt to a football practice where Matt plays as a goalie and is met with a humbling defeat. At the Abbey, Bover becomes increasingly hostile towards Matt, causing him to leave and drive to Millwall's hangout, where he meets Tommy Hatcher, their brutal headman. Despite being let go, Bover's fate remains uncertain. The GSC were heading to Manchester for a United away day on a train, and unfortunately, Bover, a member of the group, fails to show up, causing Matt to express his desire to go anyways. However, Pete warns him that the Manchester firm is likely to cause trouble, and so he insists that Matt stay behind. And just as Petey makes this request, Bover shows up, but Matt disregards the warning and takes the train anyways. Pete, who was aware of the potential danger, calls ahead on his cell phone and finds out that the Manchester firm is waiting for them at the station. With no other options, the group decides to stop the express train, leaving it behind and planning to continue their journey to Manchester by taking cabs. However, they don't really find a lot of cabs. And not wanting to give up, Matt comes up with a plan and convinces a truck driver to conceal them in his cargo container, while he himself sits in the passenger side. As they approach the Manchester firm, they pretend to be a film crew for the latest Hugh Grant movie, and manage to outflank their opposition, beat them in a fight, and escape. The police soon arrive and arrest the Manchester firm, and the bravery and audacity of the GSE increases their reputation, and Matt becomes famous within the group, and they start calling him the Yank. In a voiceover, Matt reflects on his experiences, saying that he's never been so close to danger, yet he's never felt so safe. He also confesses that the violence and fighting grew on him, and that now he felt alive when pushing things to the limit. And in the midst of the excitement, Matt undergoes a transformation, from a casual jeans-wearing individual to a sleek uniformed member of the GSE, even getting a tattoo to commemorate his transformation. However, just as he was embracing this new chapter in his life, his father arrives, throwing a wrench in his newfound sense of belonging. Carl Buckner is introduced as a man whose children lack discipline. He is facing pressure from his father to return to school and the States. While having lunch with his father at the Times, Matt is spotted by a member of the GSC who promptly informs Bover about his presence. Bover becomes enraged upon discovering that Matt is not only a journalist, but also a spy. And as the GSC members are thrilled about their quarterfinal FA Cup match, Steve soon learns from Shannon that Matt is actually a journalism student. Bover invades Peter's space and goes through Matt's laptop, finding evidence that he's been writing about the firm. Steve visits the Abbey to warn Matt about the dangerous path he's chosen by being both a journalist and associating himself with the firm. Just as he was about to leave with Matt, Steve is recognized as the GSC's famous founder, the Major. Steve shares with Matt the tragic incident that took place with Millwall, in which Tommy Hatcher's kid was killed by the GSC's boots. This event caused Steve to leave the GSC. Pete arrives at the Abbey with Bover and starts to attack Matt, but Steve intervenes. Despite the altercation, Pete comes to understand that Matt can be trusted, which enrages Bover even further. He travels to Millwall to inform Tommy Hatcher that Matt is a journalist and that the Major has returned. Millwall arrives at the Abbey just as Steve is about to leave, causing chaos. In the melee, Steve is viciously attacked with a broken bottle by Tommy, but Pete and Matt manage to get him to safety and to a hospital, where they receive help from Bover, who is filled with remorse for his actions. At the hospital, Shannon is livid with Pete and accuses him of getting Steve involved in the dangerous world of hooliganism. Matt calms her down, and he himself begins to understand the deadly consequences of revenge, and the doctors tell them that Steve is actually expected to survive. Shannon decides to leave for Boston with her baby, seeking a safe haven. Meanwhile, Pete sets up a confrontation with the Millwall firm at the wharf the next day. Matt is told to go home as this is not his fight to take part in, but despite being packed to leave, Matt decides to go for the fight, joining the Assembly tribe for the GSE. The powerful Assembly, accompanied by the theme music One Blood, sends a message of unity and standing their ground, even when it's not for reputation, but for retribution. A brutal and horrifying rumble, dubbed a holy war, ensues. Tommy is determined to avenge his son's death by killing Pete. Pete is almost killed but is saved by Bover's intervention. However, things take a turn for the worst when Matt foolishly calls for Shannon, who was then chased by Tommy's lieutenant. Matt tries to protect her, but is severely beaten. Pete asks Bover to save his brother's family, and Bover charges towards the Millwall henchman, with Tommy close behind. As Tommy moves into attack, Pete insults him, causing him to attack with vengeance. Both firms pull away, but it's too late, as Pete was already dead. The scene closes with an aerial shot of Pete's broken body, surrounded by both firms who are stunned and mourning the loss of their friend. Bover weeps and throws himself across Pete's body. Matt's voiceover sets the stage, reflecting on the lessons he learned from his friend Pete, to stand his ground and to know when it's time to leave. The film closes with a touching epilogue, showing Jeremy in a posh business club. After being congratulated by his associates, he retreats to the bathroom to use some drugs. Matt appears in a sleek black turtleneck and catches Jeremy by surprise. Jeremy comments on Matt's appearance, to which Matt reminds him of a promise to help him return to Harvard. As Matt plays a recording of Jeremy's confession, he takes control of the situation. With one hand, he pins Jeremy against the wall, warning him not to make any sudden moves. But Matt ultimately decides to leave, drawing upon the lessons he learned from Pete's life and death. The scene ends with Matt walking down a Boston street, singing "I'm Forever Blowing Bubbles," and joined by an unseen chorus of voices. The film draws to a close with Matt shouting "United" and clapping his hand in unison with his invisible champions. And that's it for this one, guys. Please remember to leave a like, leave a comment. I hope you guys liked my recap. Subscribe to my channel. I will see you on the next recap. Bye.